poems by Miss Brooks. And probably one of her most well-known poems is a very short poem called We Real Cool. Now, I mentioned this poem in my first part of the show last week. So here's the poem, We Real Cool. And it begins with this little line. The pool players, 7 at the golden shovel. We real cool, we left school, we lurk late, we strike straight, we sing sin, we fen gin, we jazz June, we die soon. It's such a short poem, isn't it? Yet it's filled with so much atmosphere. I remember hearing Gwendolyn read this poem, and she said, in some places this poem was banned. And I thought, why? And she said it was because of the word jazz. Jazz, J-A-Z-Z, because some people associated jazz with, naughty things like sexuality. Boy, back in the day, huh? I'm going to read it again. We real cool. The pool players, 7 at the golden shovel. We real cool. We left school. We lurk late. We strike straight. We sing a sin. We fen gin. We jazz June. We die soon. Poems are like that. Poems are like that. Sometimes they just take on a life of their own. Sometimes they want to be read a second time, or even a third or a fourth time, right? Unlike taking in a sculpture or a painting where we can pause and consider for a good long while, the words of a poem can just fly away from us soon after they land on our ear or on our hearts. You know what? If you'd like to hear this poem or any of this broadcast again, you can. You can download this audio recording. You can also hear this particular poem on The Poet's Breath. You can go to any good poetry website and listen to an audio recording of Miss Brooks. Okay? Near the end of the broadcast, I'll share a link with you of one of my favorite poetry websites where you can listen to Miss Brooks reading this poem. You can also find video clips of her sharing this and some of her other poems on YouTube. Who knew? Right? I remember as I was doing my research for the show, I was absolutely amazed at what I found about Brooks and her prolific volume of written work and her service in her community, with our youth, in our schools, and on the streets, with prisoners, with people in taverns and bars, and in churches, okay? I mean, she'd show up just about anywhere to read a poem, to share a poem. So if you haven't already grabbed your cup of tea or coffee or your cool glass of water or lemonade or whatever you're sipping, maybe you've put on your walking shoes, okay? Or maybe it's time to do so, to lace them up and grab your earbuds. But we're going to have a good time today. Here's another poem by Ms. Gwendolyn. It's called Kitchenette Building, and it's one of my favorites. Kitchenette Building. We are things of dry hours. We are things of dry hours and the involuntary plan. Grayed in and gray. Dream makes a giddy sound, not strong like rent, feeding a wife, satisfying a man. But a dream, could a dream send up through onion fumes its white and violet, fight with fried potatoes and yesterday's garbage ripening in the hall, flutter, or sing an aria down these rooms. Even if we were willing to let it in, had time to warm it up, keep it very clean, anticipate a message, let it begin. We wonder. But not well. Not for a minute. Since number 5 is out of the bathroom now, we think of lukewarm water, hope to get in it. Mercy. I just love this poem for so many reasons. I think the most significant one is because it helps me recall in an instant, it helps me recall my own life of living in the projects, not in Chicago, but in Detroit. And it connects me to the dreams that so many people had. Dreams that were seldom realized because the urgency of life, the urgency of what was right in front of you day in and day out took over. And over time, the dream began to grow smaller and smaller and smaller until there was no dream. There was only the concrete reality of the onion fumes from somebody else's cramped apartment. There was only the smell of your own or somebody else's garbage whenever you took your family's garbage down the hall to drop it into the chute that led to the incinerator in the basement. The waiting for one of your neighbors to hurry up and finish up in the bathroom so you could have your turn. And then the hot smell and touch of asphalt just outside your front door. Brooks is so skilled at capturing the essence of a person's life in just a few small words, well chosen, placed just so. A few well-chosen images, sounds, sights, tastes, smells, remembrances. And you know what? She's not just gifted in writing about people. She's also gifted in being with people. Sabrina Miller, in writing an article for the Chicago Tribune about the legacy of Gwendolyn Brooks, reminds us that long before the black arts movement of the 1960s brought fiery rhetoric to the mainstream, Brooks was holding poetry workshops in her home with members of the notorious street gang, the Blackstone Rangers. Gifted not only in writing about people, but in being with people. Her people. Susan L. Taylor, former editor-in-chief of Essence magazine, calls Brooks a master writer who communicated the most profound ideas in a simple, accessible way. Taylor says she was truly a humble queen among us who loved her blackness, who loved being a woman, and who had a generosity of spirit that is unparalleled. Hear, hear. This is the Gwendolyn Brooks that I met. This is the Gwendolyn that I met through her poems and in person. And here is one of her simple, accessible poems called Sadie and Maud. Sadie and Maud. Maud went to college. Sadie stayed at home. Sadie scraped life with a fine-toothed comb. She didn't leave a tangle in. Her comb found every strand. Sadie was one of the livingest chicks in all the land. Sadie bore 2 babies under her maiden name, Maud and Ma and Papa nearly died of shame. When Sadie said her last so long, her girl struck out from home. Sadie left as heritage her fine-tooth comb. Maud, who went to college, is a thin brown mouse. She is living all alone in this old house. Simple, yes. Accessible, yes. And like any good poem, let me tell you something. Listen up. Like any good poem, there is much more to it than meets the eye. Now, on the surface, this poem is about women, right? One named Sadie and one named Maud. And when we hear the song beneath the song of the poem, it's really about relationship, isn't it? Our relationships with other people, our relationship with the world, our relationship with life, with risk-taking, with living. It's about being in relationship with ourselves. I mean, on another layer, this poem really is a metaphor, right? It's an idea, it's a metaphor, an image. It's all about life. All about life and all about living. And how we live is how we do everything else, right? It's how we parent, how we teach, how we hold ourselves in our friendships. How we live is how we serve. How we live is how we lead in any aspect of our lives. Now, to learn more about Gwendolyn Brooks and her life of writing and service, I suggest you visit the Poetry Foundation website. That's the Poetry Foundation website, www.poetryfoundation.org. Okay? poetryfoundation.org. Okay, and that's all smushed together like one word. You could read more about Brooks, her life. You can hear her read her poems on this website, and you can see and read silently or aloud, if that's your choice, many of her other poems. You can also find a wonderful tribute to Gwendolyn's life in Brian Lanker's beautiful book called I Dream a World. Now, I mentioned this incredible resource to you on my show about Dr. Maya Angelou. I Dream a World is a lovely, lovely photo narrative book. It's oversized, and the photos, these portraits, actually take up one full page, and on the other side, on the facing page, is a narrative, words from each woman's mouth that paint a picture of her values, of her family, of her work, her struggles, her loves, her hopes, her joys, her dealing with barriers and obstacles in her life, and ultimately words that paint a vivid picture of her victories and her triumphs. This is Brian Lanker's, Lanker, Brian Lanker, I Dream a World. The book was published in 1989, and when I bought it many, many years ago, I recognized many of the women in it. Yes. And some of them I became familiar with only after reading their narratives and looking into their eyes. Okay? This is what these photos do for you. It feels like, you're right there with this wonderful human being. So looking into the eyes of the women who looked back at me from the pages. Even now, it's on my coffee table in my living room, and many years later, I look at this book, and I just continue to be inspired by the amazing women who grace the pages of this powerful, powerful book. I continue to be inspired by their lives. They are, for me, a source of joy and renewal. I just want to call some of the names of these women. You will surely recognize some of them, and some of them you may not recognize. These women are divas and dancers, actors and athletes, educators and evocateurs. These women are artists, activists, and advocates. They're politicians and poets. They are community organizers.